Welcome back to episode 27 of the Precious Metal Gems podcast. I'm Zan here with Brian. Brian, you're back off the injured list. How you feeling? Just in time for Thanksgiving.
I feel good. Just had some busy week, middle of the week with family stuff going on. So could only really record 2 days and it wasn't going to work. So I had to have Andy come in as a backup and just fill in for me. I think he did a really good job. I love the episode.
Quintessential pinch hitter, Andy is.
Yeah.
Just comes out, play any spot in the infield. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about, a couple of people have requested looking at early 90s sets. So we talk a lot about 96 to 2000. Some people want to talk a little bit about 90, 91, 92, 93. So we're going to get into that in just a bit. And then we've got discuss an interesting poll that Brian put up about why people collect towards the end of the episode. So stay tuned for that. First up, mail day. Again, it's unexciting, but I just don't have anything to share, unfortunately, amidst this massive consolidation. So I'm relying on you to give us some good pickups. What do you got?
The first one is Clay Matthews card that I got a while back, but I just haven't shared it. So finally sharing it now. It's a 2013 Topps Chrome Superfractor Clay Matthews. By this time, it would be up on my Instagram, but I think it's probably the best looking Clay Matthews card by far. I originally saw this card when Michael at this film Not Yet Rated posted a countdown of his clay cards, and talking to him for a while now, he explained to me that he's been collecting Clay Matthews since really he started his career. He's was primarily collecting Clay Matthews, so he amassed a pretty huge collection of his cards, and then it really is key cards. At one point he had almost all of his black finites, some of which I own. He had, and then he's had a lot of superfractors, 101s, shields, and not just shields, but like some of his patch cards were like they're like the dirty patches that. I'm not like a huge patch guy, but if I were to get a patch card, like to have something that's like got grass stains and stuff on it, it's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
He has a lot of those. So he just has like an insane collection, the best Clay Matthews collection of all times. And when he did his countdown, he's got the 2009 Bowman or Topps Chrome Superfractor, his rookie, which most would say like that's his best card. And a friend of mine got that one. And then he had that as number 2 on his countdown. He had this 2013, as number 1, mainly because the things that I said about it, like the image, the card aesthetics, like it's a really cool card. I mean, I think to me, it's like pretty much tied with that Topps, that rookie 2009 as far as significance. It's just a really cool card. It's, equal with any finite that I own of him, any Prism finite. It's just, I think the image, and then you have, the specifics with the superfractor. Anybody who collects superfractors knows that they don't all look the same. Some are kind of lighter colored. Some are, I don't know what Topps and Bowman do, but some years of them don't look the same. This one's got a really deep gold to it. So it's just, to me, it's like the perfect Clay Matthews card.
He, when he posted it as his number 1 card, he mentioned that that's from a game where Matthews was preying on Jay Cutler, and it includes on the second slide a quote from Clay Matthews. Says, "I'm glad I got a lot of sacks against him. I'll miss that the most, but hopefully the next in line in Chicago will be as equally willing to help me pad my stats."
There's great quotes between him and about the Bears, and also Charles Woodson's got a number of them, and Jair Alexander's filling in with really well with that too. So there's a lot of great Packers Bears quotes. One thing, so there's a lot of people that might have wondered, like, why is Michael selling all those cards? And I mean, I don't want to speak for him, but from what I gathered is just kind of like he collected them for a really long time. He amassed this huge collection. He kind of finished it, and now wants to move on to collect like. I don't know exactly. He doesn't really know, but he listed a few players. So just maybe focusing on some different players. So he decided to move that whole collection and just build something else. So he's not getting out of cards. He's just changing his path. He kind of finished up with Clay. And then do you have something to add?
No, I was just gonna say that. Yeah, the pose on that card is fantastic. I could see why that would be your favorite.
Yeah, it's a great image. The other one was a gift from a avid listener of the show at Insta underscore account underscore Haver, Insta account Haver. He knew that I started collecting. I didn't really start, but I started getting some better cards of Giovanni Gallardo. And he gifted me this 2006 Bowman Draft Picks and Prospects Futures Game Prospects. Giovanni Gallardo, red out of 5. And with these early chromes, Bowman chromes specifically, out of 5, they're really tough to find. They're about equally as hard to find as a superfractor. They're really cool. I started to try to pick up some Brewers in reds out of 5 for Bowman. And this is the second one that I own. There's a few Prince Fielders that I'm looking at getting as well. But this is just a really cool card. It's the same as his rookie year. It's not technically his rookie card because in 2006, that's when, if you listen to previous episodes, the companies had to shift over to the player having to make their debut to be considered a rookie. But it's the same year as his first Bowman card. So his first Bowman card is in 2006. I have the superfractor of it. That's from the Bowman Prospects, Bowman Chrome Prospects set. This is from the Bowman Chrome Draft Picks and Prospects set. It's kind of confusing, but it's the same year. It's just another Bowman brand. He did have rookies in 2005, which makes it even more confusing. Technically, his rookie card is in 2005. It's like he's got like a Donruss Elite, I think, status or something out of there out of 10, which is pretty cool, but that's technically his rookie card, the 2005s. But these are his first Bowman Chrome cards. So I appreciate that gift from Insta account Haver, and hopefully I can find something that he wants and I can send him, a gift back in return.
Yeah, shout out to Pat. He sent me a 97 Platinum Gold Keith Byers, which is a fun one. Fun fact about Pat, actually, he and I went to the same college, and he was friends with my freshman year RA. And so, small world. He's now Pat's I believe a business school professor in Canada. I might have that wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, Pat. All right, so we are going to skip card of the week this week, mainly because in our main segment with the 90s cards, we'll be talking about some of these popular cards that have sold during that time frame, or not during that time frame, but that were released during that time frame and have sold more recently. So I don't want to overwhelm you guys with too many prices and population counts, etc. So we'll dive into listener questions now. First one is from, this is better for you than it is for me because my answer is no. This is from boomers _ card _ collection. And as the name might imply, he's asking, do you guys collect any vintage? And if so, what is it?
Well, I used to collect a ton of vintage. That's mainly what I had. I had probably like 85% vintage throughout most of my life. And then even more when I started buying cards again in about 2020, 2021. And it was mainly all vintage. But now it's totally flipped. I got rid of most of my vintage cards. I'd say again about like 99% of them. And really the only ones I have are, I try to collect and have all of the Brewers from 1971 all the way through, I guess it would be 1989. Most of the Brewer cards in the 80s. I don't go crazy with the 80s when they started adding the other brands, but mainly the top stuff through 81. And I'll pick up, just a few random ones, but I put them in binders. So like, this is like my 70s binder. So if anybody was ever wondering, like, do we do binder projects? I have like the whole 71 set, and then it goes through like 72, and so on. So just the team sets, but mainly I just throw them all in binders. So I do collect vintage, but it's really just Brewers, and I'd like to start putting together some binders of some of the Packers team sets for the 50s and 60s and 70s as well, but I haven't gotten to that point yet. I got some random ones laying around, mainly from the 50s, but I'm going to probably get to that later this year because I've kind of tapped out my card funds for the next like few months with funding pretty expensive cards. So I'll probably be doing some cheaper projects like binder stuff moving forward for a while. Okay. So the next question we have is by Mrs. Black Hat cards, and it's for Zan. Is the hobby better or worse with so much technology?
This is a good question from Meg. And it could be argued both ways. I think the technology, like that clip you posted on your story, that I think that was just going viral of that idiot breaking, that was like dissing women in the hobby, um, like whatnot is a just it's like a seedy underbelly of the hobby. There are certain components of technology breaking just so much on social media that are, I would say, negative and can contribute to the hobby experience in a negative way. But at the same time, in contrast with when we were collecting as kids, I mean, the proliferation of auction houses and eBay, Card Ladder, Instagram, in a lot of ways, while there are some negative aspects about it, and we point those out time to time, the fact is that we would not be able to find the cards that we do find without, um, widespread internet usage. The amount of times that I can find cards in person is pretty much the national. And I have a big show, if you want to call it that, that comes once or twice a year, Culture Collision. It's not a great show, but there are a lot of people in the country and around the world that don't have shows at all, or they may have really, really small shows that just don't have what they're looking for. So I definitely think that there are positives and negatives. But overall, maybe I'll just be the eternal optimist and say it's positive because it ultimately I benefit from it so much. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. The whatnot, breaking culture, all that stuff is the worst part about the hobby. And then I would say by far the best is Instagram. I mean, I probably wouldn't have almost any of the cards that I own today if it wasn't for Instagram or social media and like connecting with people and just meeting people and, the groups and people finding cards for each other. I remember, part of the reason why collecting in the 90s, like the mid to late 90s as a kid, it you couldn't really see or find any of these cards is because of the spread of information. Like it was really tough. All you had was like a Beckett magazine, your local shows, and maybe if you traveled to like some of the bigger shows, but unless you got lucky, it was really tough to track any of these down because the connections between people and like no eBay and all that it just wasn't there. So that really killed that connection. And I think the reason why, some people wonder like, well, why are all these cards being sold and why are they coming around and why is it easier to find these cards now? Well, it's because of social media. It's not because, nothing's really different, than it was in the 90s other than, the cards are more valuable maybe, but it's really the connectivity of collectors. You had blowout forums pretty early on, and that was a way to kind of connect early on before we had Instagram and the other social media. But that was one group. Like not everybody was on Blowout. More people are on Instagram obviously than Blowout. So
Yeah, we've had to resort to. Well, I got still go on Blowout, but it's not. Obviously, it's not what it once was. I mean, the odds of being able to make a deal are very small. I mean, the stuff I post on Instagram, if I'm selling it, I'm, I usually get some interest. Maybe it's lukewarm interest, but some interest. Blowout, you get almost nothing. So it's very difficult. And if you like 90s stuff, Blowout's more dedicated to modern, ultra modern, and then the vintage as well. So, yeah, I'm thankful for Instagram for one. Next question is from Meg's husband, Chad, Black Hat _ cards. He says, do you make exceptions for unlicensed cards in your PC?
I don't right now, but the only ones that I've tossed around the idea of making an exception for would be the early Prism baseball, just because I like the Prism brand and the finite parallel. And some of the early Prism baseball cards are really cool, like for the Brewers. So like a Braun, or I think Greinke has a year where he's on the Brewers and he has a Prism finite. I think it's even on eBay right now. So those, every time I see him, I watch him on eBay and I'm like, yeah, should I buy him? Because I mean, I like finite and they just are cheap because they're unlicensed. but then I never really pull the trigger. So that would be the only one that I would make the exception for, would be the Brewers baseball stuff.
I was gonna say, actually, I'm glad you went first because my first inclination was to make fun of early prison baseball, mainly
You can make
because,
fun of it.
mainly because I remember when Spinatron posted like the Griffey Black Finite, maybe 2012 or something, and was like trying to justify it as like one of the best Griffey cards in existence. And I just remember looking at it and seeing like no logo on the jersey or the helmet. It just says Seattle Baseball Club under his name. It's like, I don't know, man. I mean, I guess if you're doing it at a low price point, that's fine. You want to get, it sucks that you can't get the Prism brand on baseball. I totally get that. I personally don't do it, but I just mainly because of finite budget and my interests always keep expanding. So I typically dedicate the money to those interests rather than the unlicensed stuff. But I think it has a place in anybody's collection if you like it.
It's kind of like post playing years with me. Like I see them,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, should I get that? That's cool. And I'm like, no, because I'm gonna get it, and I'm gonna be like, why did I get this? Because I'm at the point where like everything that I buy has to fit in like a certain piece of my collection or a certain part of it. And if it doesn't fit in that compartment in my collection, it's eventually going to get moved. Like I can't do it anymore. So they're cool. I think I'd be more just buying the card because I like Prism as opposed to like thinking it's a significant baseball card or something. That's where I'm at with that. The next question is also from Black Hat Cards, and it's how long do you think the new era of price discovery will last? And a little background to that is that I'm in a group chat with him and a few others, and we talk about like this era of price discovery, meaning like what it says, price discovery, but the basically the current market where things are just fluctuating so much and running up pretty quickly. How long can something like that sustain and last?
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that because I didn't really know what that meant. Also, hilarious that the Black Hat family was like on date night and they were just writing up questions for our podcast. 3 in a row. Thank you guys for the question. So obviously prices are cyclical and they cannot go up in perpetuity. So at some point there's got to be a downturn. Now you look back at 2021, 2020, and the boom, and you look at what was booming. I mean, there was some good, solid sales on late 90s cards, but late 90s cards are doing, generally speaking, better now than they were in 2021 versus modern, which was everybody's getting back into collecting. Modern's the first place they go, or ultra modern. So those prices have come way down. Like you look at modern QBs, top MLB prospects, etc. Um, as far as 90s goes, it's kind of hard to tell because, I mean, you and I have seen it just over the last like 6 months. People that we didn't know before they messaged us who are like, hey, I'm getting into 90s cards and, I'm thinking about this player. And like buddy Brian King's collection just started into baseball. There's guys who've asked me about Nomar and all these players that um, they're interested in it. And as that happens and it grows, there's more competition naturally for their cards and prices tend to go up. Um, but I think part of it also depends on what you're looking at. Like we've talked about Jordan inserts and things that have been printed and have been printed in high quantities or that are relatively common. If you see those prices going up, I think that's probably or too quickly, I think that's probably a warning sign. Um, but as for the other stuff, I mean, yes, it can't go up forever, but I do think there's still growth in this area. And I don't want to sound like, I'm talking investments or whatever, but I do think there's still growth and room for more people to come in and discover these cards in particular.
Let me ask you this: how many eras? We talk about so you got the '90s, you have vintage. Like, how many eras do you think there are between the '90s stuff and now? What I'm saying is like you can't really lump all the 90s into the same box, as we're going to talk about, later today. There's like early 90s, there's
Yeah.
different like breakdowns. Like, how many do you think there are? Like, think of the 2000s. Like, how many are there? How many different eras of collecting are there?
Starting when?
Start with 2000. How many eras do you
Oh,
think there are?
I mean, I think there's the 2000 to, I'm going to say 2000 to 2011, but you could break that into two eras probably because there's a dead period in there and
Yeah.
like the '08, like that. I mean, '08 basketball is popping, but there are a few years in there, like '07 maybe, where there's either the rookie classes suck, the products weren't great. I mean, you've got jumping out like '02 finest, '04 tops chrome, 5, 6 finest, 10, 11 finest, and then this Bowman chrome. So there was definitely, that was to me like the tops chrome card era, the biggest one, right? Because they just kind of started in '93, right, with the finest refractors, but really 2000 to 2011 really was, I think that
I'd
was
agree
one
with
era.
that.
Then I would go 2012 to 2018
Yeah,
or
we could call that the
2019,
early
2018.
2000s era, and then like you
The
could
the
say the
Panini
Prism,
one,
the
Panini one
Panini.
era, first Panini era,
Okay.
right? Which is when there's 2012 Prism up through 2018 or maybe 2019, basically pre-COVID. Because when the boom hit 2020 to present, well, I guess you could then flip 2020 to 2022, maybe early 2022, and then 2022 to present because of in terms of prices. Um, but the 2020 to present is really the overproduction phase
Hmm.
where you're getting into insane amounts of parallels and products that never existed 10 years ago.
And
What do
this
you
would
think?
run it, yeah, and this would run until the end of the Panini era, and then it would break off and go Fanatics era, and then
I
whatever
suppose,
mess.
yeah, I think that's probably right. And again, you could come up with like uh, micro eras in their breakdowns, but I think generally speaking, there's at least three distinct phases since 2000 that we've seen.
So
The
my the
first two
in,
bigger than the third.
I agree with everything you said. I think the interesting part for me is gonna be what's gonna happen with some of, I think like the early 2000s, depending, this is also depending on what sport too, because if you go in basketball,
Yeah,
like with
that's
early
true.
2000s, I mean, the exquisite stuff, like, I
That's
don't know
true.
when it's going to stop. I mean, it continues to do pretty well. But one thing that worries me about all of the pricing right now with any card, whether it's the ultra modern stuff, like the finites and stuff that I collect, is the rate at which it goes up. I didn't really understand this until, I guess, recently, but like the boom, I mean, I guess I understood it looking at COVID, but the boom just was proof that when things artificially or just too quickly go up in value and go up in price and just get really inflated, it's inevitable that it's going to go down. It's not natural, right? It's not
Hmm.
organic. When it's organic, steady growth, when if anybody's getting into the hobby now and looking at prices and you hear people talk about like organic growth, well, what does that mean? It's more like you look at vintage, it's just continuously, slowly staying steady and going up a few percentages, every year or two overall. With us, you don't get that middle finger graph because it hits a point, it can't sustain it, it can't go up anymore, it goes up so quick, it can't go up anymore. So when prices just climb so quickly on some of these, you just worry when the crash is going to come. And I don't think there's going to be so
Hmm.
much of a crash because I think there's like levels built in with people buying these cards where like they'll look at any major set, like the PMGs, Black Finites now, or any key set, and they'll be like, when it hits a price point, I'm just going to always buy these cards. I don't care what it is. Like, it's never going to get lower than this. I think there's just too many
Hmm.
people that are going to do that. But you just worry when things go up, they're not organically.
Right. No, I agree. And we saw that with those, like to me, those Peyton Manning '98
Oh yeah.
PMGs. We talked about that before.
Uh,
All right. Next one at Drake's PC. Would you rather own the best rookie cards of players you collect, but you can't own any non rookies of theirs? Or would you rather own the 10 or the best 10 non-rookie cards of the players, but you can't own any of the rookies? So basically, it's rookie year cards only, or all other years are fair game.
Yeah, and the best ones of those.
And the
So I'm
best ones of
assuming he's
those.
including
Yeah.
like 101s and stuff like that. So
I
for
think
me,
so. I think so.
it's pretty easy. Like I'm trying to think of Favre or even Rodgers,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I would definitely take the 10 best non-rookie cards, especially for Favre and Rodgers, because Rodgers' years I don't really care much about his rookie cards anymore. And then with Favre, I mean, definitely not. Obviously, I love that card. Obviously, it's again nostalgic, which we'll get to later in the episode, but it's not. I would much rather have his 10 best non-rookie year cards.
Yeah. Yeah. That's easy for me because I'm thinking about the guys I collect, and none of them, I mean, none of their rookie years would be. The big one's 98, like Woodson, Moss, and Manning.
Yeah.
Let's say you collected one of those guys. Take yourself out of you're not a Packers fan. So like if you collect Woodson, would you do 98 only or all other years?
Yeah, then that's tough.
That's tough, right?
I'm gonna think of I'm just gonna think of Woodson. I'd probably take his rookie year because
Yeah.
you get the 98 Gem Master. What sucks about that is you don't get any like NFL uniform stuff.
Yeah, that's tough because the Super Rave, the Platinum Medallion 1, the PMG, those are all college uni.
I'm gonna take that
The
back. I can answer that right now. I would take still the 10 best because I would get the 99 Gem Masters from him. I'd get like the 24 karat.
02 Super, yeah,
Yeah, I get
05
the
Super and 6 Super. Oh, he's not in those. 10,
2012
right?
Black
10.
Finite, the 2012 Black Finite
Yeah,
Prism. So
right. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's for me. I actually don't know. I mean, it's close. If I've collected Manning or Moth, I think I think that's. I actually might take the rookie year because I am pretty heavily into '90s. So really, it's like, would I rather have the? I don't know. It's a tough question. That's a good question. I think those are the main years. And if you have a guy in like '97, maybe Tony Gonzalez, I'd still take his. The other years. I think so. If your answer to that is the rookie season, message us and tell us like who you collect and why.
would you rather have here quickly? Would you rather have Gino's essential credentials? Was it the out of three the
Mm-hmm.
now, or is it the
Mm-hmm.
future, or would you rather
The
have
future.
like the 99 Gem Master?
Uh, 99 Gem Master. If I'm thinking about it from obviously now we know there's only two copies of the future, right? So
Yeah,
I'd be getting basically the other one if Gino had one. But I still like that photo on the 99, I think.
yeah.
I think,
I'd
yeah,
still do the
I'd go
99.
with
It's
that.
closer, but I do the 99,
Yeah.
especially if they have like a low numbered essential credentials. It makes it even more difficult. You get a Gem Masters 98, and you get a
Yeah.
low numbered
Yeah.
essential credentials.
Right.
I don't know. It's a
That's
good
tough.
question. Um, so the next one is from Drake's PC. You get start one, bench one, cut one, and it's PMG's
Hmm.
credentials or rubies. Where you at?
So this is the diplomatic way of FMK, basically, that
Yeah.
Drake's proposing. So start, bench, cut. I will. Well, that's a good question. I think it depends on sport. For baseball, I would probably take the. I'd probably start credentials, bench PMG, and cut rubies because rubies doesn't have the 97, so that's an easy one. But credentials versus PMGs is tough. I like the 3 years of credentials. I really like the 97s, and there's just no 97s in baseball, so that's tricky. If it's football, I would probably cut credentials actually, and then do. Oh, I think I'd start rubies and bench PMGs. Because 97 and 98 rubies I really like, and PMGs really 99 is my favorite. But I do like the greens. I don't know. That's tough. What would you do for football there?
Yeah, baseball, I have the exact same mindset as you, so I can
Yeah.
just skip that one. For football, I have to start PMGs, and then it's really comes down to the next two. the only thing that's propping up rubies for me is the 97s. I'm just
Yeah.
like, I like the 97 rubies over any credentials, but it's like, do I weigh that card over all of those other years of credentials, which I love?
Yeah.
It's it's so tough. I'll just say I'll bench credentials. No, I'm going to bench rubies because I got to have the 97. I'll cut the other ones. I'll sacrifice all the other ones that I like less and just keep the 97 rubies. So it'd be start PMGs, bench rubies, and then cut credentials, unfortunately. But it's close.
Yeah. I guess I kind of I knock credentials a little because it has like PMGs and rubies did the finite run of 3 years based, well, 4 years, and but it for rubies, but credentials continued on, and I thought it was not as strong. So I give a little bit of credit for, like we talked about, Terrell Davis. He was good for those 3 years. He didn't kind of like fade into unproductive seasons. So maybe I would start PMGs just because you've got the red, the green, 98, 99, and none of them are weak. So
Yeah.
that's tough. Okay, last one here from Tri City Cards. I recently picked up a Fleer Brilliance Gold Moss rookie out of 99 at a local show. I was really surprised how inexpensive it was. I was hoping you could shed some light on how you view this specific card within the Moss rookie card hierarchy. As a side note, or perhaps as an entirely separate question altogether, what is your opinion on pursuing second level parallels of top tier players out of desirable sets, either due to being priced out of the top tier parallel or simply being unable to track it down? So, like he says, he's pivoted to the Moss Gold out of 99 because the 24 karat gold, there's only 24 copies, and I believe one just sold for like $40,000 a Moss, that is. Or essential credentials now versus futures, or maybe if you want to spin that a different way, in the 97s, like baseball credentials versus essential credentials. What do you think?
Um, so to answer the first part, like where I would put that 99 gold, Fleer Brilliance gold, like within
Mm-hmm.
his hierarchy of his rookie cards, I guess. What does he have for do you know what are his 90s, his 98 essential credentials number? And do you know what's the higher numbered
Who,
one?
Moss?
Yeah.
Moss. 55 is the now, 6 is the future.
Okay. Yeah. So it's 50. So it'd still be more than the EC. I mean, it probably fits into like the lower tiered of numbered Moss rookies. I don't know what his whole numbered list would be, but I mean, it's better than, to me, it's better than any like non-numbered rookie card for sure. And if you don't want to pay for the 24 karat, which again, you said, I mean, the price is insane on it. The gold out of 99 is a nice, second tier card to that because it still looks good. It's just that it doesn't have that like extra shine. I mean, when you hold them, if you ever had a 24 karat, and then you kind of like don't want the 99, at least for me, I don't want the 99s anymore just because there's a significant difference to them. But I still think it's a great card. When it comes to essential credentials, a lot of times I'll seek out like just the higher numbered ones if I'm not going to pay up for like the stuff that's under 10, because it's just like with the Favre, the 99 Favre, he's, what is that now? Is it out of 11 or 13 or something?
The 99, you said?
Yeah, the 99
16. 16,
16.
yeah.
So like
Yeah.
I'll just get the gold one, the future, because I think it looks better. One, and two, it's a lot cheaper. It's out of like 76 or something, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
75. Yeah, that's a good point. The credentials is a nice way to look at it too. As far as the gold goes, I mean, I really do think, like you said, it's a card numbered under 100, and it is a rookie card. He's in the Pro Uni in that set, which I really like, because we were talking about a second ago. There's not a ton of Pro Uni stuff in the high end sets. Um, and if you like Moss, you collect Moss, and you want to just have a nice rookie card of his, that's definitely one to consider. But it's sort of like, once you see a 24 karat, it's tough to go back. But I understand for Moss, like, I mean, not many people could spend that much money on the 24 karat. Um, but generally speaking, like, I think that's a great way to access some of these sets that are, the price points have gotten too high. Another kind of way to maybe think about it is not necessarily a second tier parallel, but like I'm thinking of the PMGs. Like if you have a guy that's in 99, he's in like the MLPD or the on the fly or something. You could get one of those for like, I think like a bonds on the fly would be like maybe $2,000 versus $6,000 to $8,000 for the base version. So there's other ways to do that as well. Okay, 90s time, early 90s time. Brian made a nifty slideshow here that he's going to share with us, starting with the 1990 releases here. What
So
do
we put
you
this
have for
together
us?
to. You got that?
Yeah, it looks good. I can see Mike Piazza, and then
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's Dion transitioning there.
Yeah. So the reason why, I was thinking about this presentation and to kind of talk about the early 90s stuff beyond the fact that we were getting some questions to talk about the early 90s. We kind of glance, over it, just, kind of breeze by it. Mainly it's because I read an article that Mike Summer wrote. And if you're not familiar with him, he has a podcast, and you can search and listen to some of his podcasts. He talks a lot about really all eras, but he focuses on the 90s in this article he writes for Beckett. And he talks about going back through his old Beckett magazines and it bringing back nostalgia for, his collecting early 90s cards, mainly is what he talks about in this article. And one thing that he hits here is a quote by Dr. Beckett when he goes through it. And he talks about the fact that um, we can't predict the future, but when we use obviously the pricing and the cyclical nature of the card market from the past, mainly looking at like the 80s and 90s, because that's when collecting was the hottest, the late 80s and early 90s. When it started, I mean, obviously it's really hot now, but he talks about using and referencing that period and that initial cycle as a way to kind of predict not necessarily future pricing, but just the cycle of the market. Like there is going to be a point where it's going to hit the same type of cycle as the early 90s did. And what we can take from that, as you're going to see, is the early 90s, which we categorize from 1990 to 1993. And then the mid 90s are like 94 to 96. And then the late stuff is 97 to 99. That's a good breakdown of it. But with the early 90s, you're going to see in these sets is that collecting, the hobby boom, the initial hobby boom, started in the mid to late 80s. And then card companies started mass producing cards. Everybody started finding their old Mickey Mantles and Hank Aaron's in their closets and their shoe boxes, and people were buying them at shows. So they figured, well, when we produce cards, we can start getting, making rookie cards of modern players, and people are going to start collecting them. What happened in the early 90s and late 80s is mass producing cards led to really nobody wanting them. The junk wax era is what everybody calls it, right? You can call it the nostalgia era too. A lot of people choose to reference it that way. But as you're going to see when we go through these two, we don't discuss basketball at all, but that's just because there's just been a lot of talk over the years of basketball. The early 90s basketball sets is mainly, the Stadium Club, the Ultra, anything with Charlotte Hornets player or Shaq or Jordan. I mean, that's what it is. So we've kind of beaten that to death. So starting with 1990 football releases, that was mainly categorized by Emmitt Smith's rookie year. And some of the cards that we have pictured, if you're listening to it, maybe flip over to YouTube to see this so you can see the images of these cards. Hopefully it brings back great memories like it did for me going through this. But Emmitt Smith's rookie year was a big deal for me. That's mainly like one of the first football players that I collected, just because, he was great at the time. His cards were really hot, and he had some really cool cards. So one of them that's featured there is the Fleer, the supplemental set, which is like, I guess it's like the traded or update set, right? And that was like his key rookie at the time. Another one that's pictured there is the 1990 Action Pack All Madden Team insert set, which is technically his rookie year. He had a rookie in the regular base set, but then this one was just really cool. I remember buying these at card shows. Action Packed was the new, hit card too. It was Fleer, and then it was action packed in 1990. They had the embossed cards, and they're real thick cards and really cool images. And then the Barry Sanders market was obviously hot too, because he was coming off his Rookie of the Year season. And what I have pictured there is the 1990 Pro Set. If anybody collected in the early 90s, they probably remember Pro Set. I do. I remember the 1989 Pro Set set with that it's like a striped, different color border. I used to throw them all in a binder, and it was just really cool to have like all that entire set together, like the team set. It's just a lot of nostalgia with that. The sets contained also a lot of a large number of veteran Hall of Famers and new young stars. So if you go through a checklist of like 1990s football, if you go on the Trading Card Database and you just click Hall of Fame to filter that way, you're going to get a lot of Hall of Famers from the 70s and 80s ending their career, and then a lot of the new Hall of Famers that are just starting out, like Barry Sanders and Emmett. It's probably the biggest collection of Hall of Famers for a base set that you can come by in football. There was just so many Hall of Famers in these early 90s sets.
Emmett was the big draw, as you mentioned. His now the score supplemental is kind of his big rookie, but it was printed to death. So if you're looking to buy yourself a distinguishable one, maybe there's auto copies, but if you want just the base version, PSA 10 isn't that expensive. I think there's like 800 of them or something like that. That maybe about $1,000. The BGS 10, I think there's 12 of those. So if you you really want to hunt, those could be $5,000 to $7,000. But they do pop up a few times a year. So, that's kind of considered like the GOAT rookie for Emmett, and probably I would say the biggest or most sought after 1990 football card. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, 100%. I misspoke. It was Fleer Update. I don't know why I said Score Supplemental or Fleer Supplemental.
No, Score Supplemental is correct. No, Score Supplemental. Yeah, I don't know what you said, but Score Supplemental is the right.
Score Supplemental, and then I have the Fleer Update on the slideshow, and then Score Supplemental.
Oh, yeah.
Well. Yeah, right. All right, so we flip over to baseball. It's kind of similar. You had, instead of Emmitt Smith, you had Frank Thomas. He was the big draw at the time. And then you had Griffey in his second year, kind of like Barry Sanders being his second year card. So you had a lot of hot Griffey cards. And then you had the rookie year of Frank Thomas. Now, the big one, if you've collected it in the early 90s, probably the biggest chase card between football and baseball of that 1990 year was the Frank Thomas no-name Topps card. And I have that picture there. That's still to this day, it fetches a really good amount of money because it is pretty rare, pretty hard to find. That thing, people were ripping box after box after box when they found out that error was on there. Before Topps fully corrected it, there were still boxes out there. I don't really know how many were produced. You can look at the pop count of the graded copies. Most people that have these get them graded. So, I mean, the graded copies are probably a pretty good reference, I would say.
It's not a lot. It's 296 for PSA, 124 for Beckett, 17 for SGC, and 5 for CSG. So that's just around 450. I mean, that's a pretty small amount, all things considered.
Yeah, and also during this time, beyond the fact that you had the no name on front, Frank Thomas, you had Leaf coming back, and 1990 Leaf baseball was a revolutionary set. It wasn't doing anything super different than what Upper Deck was already doing in '89 with the high gloss cards, the new design. But what it was doing is that Leaf set was kind of rivaling Upper Deck, and it had the Frank Thomas rookie in it, where the Upper Deck in '89 was kind of built off of the Griffey rookie. And then if you look at the picture I have here of the 1990 Griffey, I think it's better looking to me than his rookie card. It's just it's an awesome looking card. But Leaf coming back into the hobby was big. It had a really cool design. I remember that set coming out was pretty hot at the time.
Yeah, and that's the Thomas you could still again distinguishable by high grade, several $1,000s for like a BGS 10. So that was kind of the for the Leaf set, that is. So yeah, it showed that there was, it increased the amount of competition, even if the amount of cards didn't necessarily decrease.
Right. So moving into 1991, this is where obviously you have our favorite Brett Favre's rookie year. Unfortunately, he didn't really have his cards were all in non-pro uniform. So, well, actually, I think he might have had two that were in Falcons. I'd have to check,
Mm-hmm.
but mainly they were his better ones were in the Southern Miss uniforms, like the one that's pictured here, the '99 Stadium Club. That was like my favorite card as a kid. I remember getting that for Christmas one year. It was just like it was the biggest deal. But
Yeah.
then there were more rare cards in '91. So Wild Card started this exchange program with the Stripes. So if anybody remembers collecting Wild Card back in the day, I have a junior sale post 1,000 stripe card. Basically, what you could do is you could trade in either 1,000 base cards, I believe, for that 1,000 stripe, or you could mix and match. You could do like 10
Mm-hmm.
copies of 100 stripe for the junior Sal or any of the players. But basically, it was like trying to, it was adding like, I guess, insert or serial number, however you want it. Really a parallel. It was like the first
Mm-hmm.
big parallel chase, right?
Yeah, I think that's I would say that's absolutely right. Tough to track because of that trade-in system of how many were printed or what the odds were. But if you look at the population reports on so there's the main set, and then Favre was in the draft pick set, and so but I think the most graded, the Favre has like 23 graded by PSA, and then like Sanders and Emmett like maybe 15. So there's not a ton of them out there in circulation.
Yeah, it was tough to track because of the exchange process.
Right.
One thing I forgot to mention too is that Stadium Club, the '91 Stadium Club. There was a Super Bowl stamped edition, which goes for not a ton, but it goes for significantly more than the base. So all it was like an embossed Super Bowl stamp that they gave out. I guess they're like Super Bowl special copies. One thing I have on here too on the slideshow is this Joe Montana. It's 1991 Upper Deck Joe Montana. It was a pretty popular card. It had 91 Upper Deck started this thing where they had like this 3-player, I don't know what you'd even call it, like a transition of him throwing, dropping back and throwing. They did it with some other players too, like I think a Nolan Ryan wind up is in one. It was kind of like trying to capture an action shot.
Do
Just
you,
a
do you
really
remember
unique.
those? Do you remember those books, Animorphs?
Yeah, yeah,
From this is what it's like. It's
it
the
is.
transition photo to photography.
It's exactly what it is. So if you're listening and not watching, if you can picture the Animorphs book,
Just yeah,
picture
go look
Joe
for your
Montana.
Animorphs collection.
Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
picture Joe Montana in a card. That's what it is. This is the first year of Pinnacle and Ultra. They make their debut in this as well. So you're starting to get more companies getting involved, more companies creating cards, and really, it's the first year of like these bigger card brands like Ultra, that we know of today. So it's the first flagship set. Next, we have the '91 baseball, and this is really significant because we have the first mainstream serial numbered card, and that's from Donruss Elite out of 10,000. So, it sounds like it's, wow, out of 10,000, who would want that junk? But think of this. If the Elite series is out of 10,000, the base cards, I mean, we're talking like there's really no number on them, but I mean, you could get upwards of like hundreds of thousands of the base cards printed or more. I mean, so if you put that in there, something out of 10,000 as opposed to a base card that's out of like 200, 300,000, it's still pretty tough to find. You could rip boxes of these things and never, I mean, you could never pull one of these. They're near impossible because of how many base cards there were in that Donruss set.
Yeah, exactly that. So 10,000 may seem insane, but like you said, because of the amount of production, these were tough to come by. and still are sought after because they have that sort of origin story. And I think PSA Magazine last month or the month before did a whole write up on this particular series. It's a good read if you're interested. And then you mentioned, I don't think you mentioned it yet, the Desert Shield
Yeah,
was
the
an
Desert Shield
interesting.
tops. That was those were sent out to troops that were serving in Saudi Arabia for Operation Desert Shield. Those still go for a pretty good amount of money if you can get a Chipper rookie. Chipper Jones was a rookie in
Mm-hmm.
that year, and that's a big card from that set. So yeah, there's also the one that I have listed here of Chipper Jones is the score. This card was significant for me because I remember there was a card shop that was right next to, if anybody from Wisconsin is listening to this, Cops Burgers and Custard over on 76th Street. So if you're familiar with Milwaukee area, Cops Custard is where it's at. Next to that, there was a card shop, or near it was a card shop, I should say, and they had just 10-cent boxes of commons. So my dad and I would go in the 92, it was 1992 at the time, and just pick apart boxes of like prospects. We were prospecting this Chipper Jones card. I mean, anytime we would see this, we'd buy it up. I had hundreds of these cards, thinking I was going to be rich eventually. And being the fact when how hot he was, how great of a player he was, you think, wow, these cards are going to go nuts. Obviously, they didn't because they're mass produced. But I see this card and I just think that was my era of prospecting in the early '90s with my dad. It's pretty funny to think about. I have Beckett magazines. I have one right here where I go through and I can see that the pages are circled with all the Chipper Jones cards on them. Like every one, I just went through and circled it with a pen. It's kind of funny to go back and look at. Um, there's
It's
the other two that are listed on here. I have the Fleer. They're like the first. They're one of the first art cards. I mean, you had Diamond Kings before that, but these cards, Fleer 1991 Fleer, really took it to the next level with these. There's a Mark McGuire, which is really cool. He's standing in front of a American flag, and then the Barry Bonds got smoke coming off his bat. And you can look any of these up on Trading Card Database. These early '90s art cards from Fleer. There's a show. I can't remember what it's called. It's what's the Matt Strom's card show that's on?
oh
Do you know what I'm talking about?
yeah, I know it.
I'm
I
drawing a
haven't
blank of
watched
the
it though.
name, but yeah, he's they have a episode on here where they talk to the artists from these cards, and it's really a cool episode. So if you're interested in these, check them out. What were you gonna say about that Chipper?
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, I liked the my favorite was the '91 Upper Deck. I remember buying a factory set of that and having like to get all. There's a lot of good players in the '91 Upper Deck. I mean, everybody's like 800 cards, but it's funny how the Desert Shield has become kind of the most sought after one. I think the PSA 10's a pop 34 and has sold for as much as like over $20,000. But it's just so interesting how, 1 year, like it could be, the Desert Shield could be the hot rookie versus like you never know what necessarily is going to catch on. Like I remember Maddox had like the Donruss and the Leaf, and I think they were like the same image, and maybe it was 87, but like for some reason one Leaf is I think more popular than the other. So it's just interesting to look back and see what caught on versus what we liked when we were kids.
Yeah, this I drew a blank, but it was Provision. These art cards are called Provision.
Provisions, that's
Yeah,
right.
the
Yeah.
white ones were included in the factory set, and then the black ones, the McGuire right there, was included in
Mm-hmm.
packs. You'd be pulled in packs. So I used to like Diamond Kings when I was a kid. I love these cards, so they're just really cool. If you can go check them out, any of these things, I would suggest going on Trading Card Database and looking at some of these early '90s sets as we're talking about them, because we're gonna miss some. I can't cover every single
Yeah.
early '90s card here, but check them out for sure. Going to '92, this is where things start to get a little bit different. You get some of the more key sets coming into play. So for '92 football, and I think it was more for football because baseball is still kind of catering. I don't want to say this, as a negative thing, but catering to the dinosaurs of the collectors in baseball. They don't want to get too crazy, But football, they're kind of testing out some of these sets to see if they catch on, and then they would bring them over to baseball. So with the 92 football release, it's Favre's first year in the Packers uni, so he's got a couple big cards. These cards still, in relation to his rookie, they still sell pretty good. His 92 Stadium Club, where he's in some Packers practice gear, and then his 92 Tops. And this is the gold first year, so this is the first year Tops does a gold card. It's not numbered. They were released, I think, one per pack, and I think you got more in like a jumbo pack, but essentially like one per pack, one gold. But it was still a big parallel. And this first year Topps Gold Favre is still a pretty decent card in a higher grade. And then the new releases for that year, you had Playoff coming in, which was really cool. They had kind of like a faded platinum looking background, and the player kind of stood out with the color on his uniform. Skybox Impact and Skybox Prime Time were a couple sets that came out. So you're getting Skybox in the mix now. Game Day made some cards that were huge. They're like the tall boy basketball cards. They're really cool images. I used to hate them. I liked them, but I hated them because they couldn't fit in a binder, fit in any.
Right.
They never made a top loader for them, so they just kind of sat sideways in a 5-row for me. And then you see the first release of Finest. So pictured on here, I have a Michael Irvin. So it's called Football's Finest, but it's really the first entry into the Finest brand for football.
Yeah, no refractors in that set, but really stood out amongst the paper cards. That playoff year was good. Had really good photography.
Yeah, they stuck together in packs really bad. So when you open them, you'd basically rip the whole front of the card off. 1992 baseball. It's similar to the football. You had the first year of the Topps Gold parallel, which was big. Still one per pack. And then the designs overall in baseball, they're slower moving in, innovation. As I said before, they try more things out in basketball and football in terms of parallels, inserts, and card designs. But baseball is starting to get better borders, more gloss, different designs. So you see that happening with all the brands in 1992. But the biggest thing to point out is Bowman. They released the iconic 1992 Bowman baseball set, and they become named or coined the home of the rookie card. That was their slogan at the time. And what they did was they really included these minor league players or a lot more rookies or first year players, minor league players in their set, as opposed to what Topps and other brands were doing. So I have pictured here the Mike Piazza, which is just iconic for me. I remember when my dad went to a card show with me. He was at a hotel in 1992. Bowman had a guarantee that if the set ever dropped in Beckett below $100, you could send it in and it would give you $100 back, no matter what. So the value of the set would never go below $100. I still think today you could go on to eBay, and I still think the set sells for right around $100, like the full set. Mainly, it's propped up because of the Mariano Rivera rookie card and the Mike Piazza rookie card. So a raw set is generally around 100. I'm not saying it's exact, but if you look at overall early 90s junk wax, that set actually held its value pretty well. Back in the day, $100 was a pretty big amount of money for baseball cards. At the time, I remember my dad was going back and forth whether he should buy it or not. He finally did. And it's a really cool set. They got some gold border cards in there as well. It's just, I have like 3 of the sets now. I can't put them in binders because I think there's like 700-800 cards in them, but they were awesome. I have a Pat Listash 1992 Fleer Ultra posted here on the slides, and that's because I remember he was, being a Brewers fan, he was like one of the hottest players because he just won Rookie of the Year. And he is a big base stealer. It's just a really cool looking card. I used to have this card in a ball and card holder as a kid where I had an autographed baseball of Pat Listash and this card, and I thought I was like the coolest person on earth. So the Manny Ramirez as well, that's his rookie year. I always love that pinnacle image of him, the pinnacle with the black border. It's just a great pose, great image. So Anything to add to that?
I,
92
I
baseball.
just, I mean, I just love the Rivera card. It's just he's like in the Dockers khakis and like the Greg Norman golf polo, just leaning against the wall,
Yeah.
just hanging. But they can get autograph versions of that card. Hard card to gym, really low gym rate, but you still get a PSA 10 for under $500, and that's considered one of the most iconic, probably the most iconic card in my opinion from that set. The Pedro is in there too, which is still pretty cheap card as well. But yeah, there's some great stars you could pick up, and it's a nice looking set. It's a really really clean design to me. It's a perfect retro kind of design that like for a paper card.
The Manny Ramirez is cool too, where he's in like
Yeah.
he's got two cards. He's got a horizontal one and he's got the vertical one, the gold border one. Um, but yeah, he's in the just again like looks like he's going to a homecoming dance or something. This is where things start getting wild for the early 90s. The 93 football release is just awesome. It's probably my
Yeah.
favorite of the early 90s. This was in like the heat of me collecting sports cards. I was nuts, foaming at the mouth at card shows at this time. I was going crazy. I had birthday parties at card shows. The 93 football was it. Many sets, they upgrade their designs. You have a bunch of new brands coming in, high end brands for the time. SP has their first release. Power, which was a really cool Pro Set Power. Skybox Premium, Select, Pacific, and then the Pacific Prisms, which we've talked about before. And they're iconic for the early 90s. And then foil becomes a main trend. And that's why I think I fell in love with foil cards. So one I have pictured here is really cool. It's from Action Pack as well. They had an ABC's Monday Night Football insert set, which I was just obsessed with because I love the helmet smashing at the beginning of the Monday Night Football. In the 90s, they stopped really doing that now. The presentation just isn't the same now for Monday Night Football. But the early 90s and mid 90s, even late Monday Night Football it was iconic. And they got the helmets on this card. This is one with Favre. I guess they have the date, and they really tie in like, I guess, football culture, like watching football into the card set. It's just the whole thing. They just kind of encompass the entire football 90s era with that card. And then you had
The
go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. Yeah.
You had the 93 SP, which I think is just awesome. It's probably my favorite SP set. But these are other things where with this early 90s stuff, I put them in like binders. So I got the 93 football set. It's just kind of cool to flip through and page through these. I have a few of the SP sets, and then I'll do it with like metal and some of these other iconic sets. They're cool to just buy in football because the sets aren't that big. I don't do it in baseball because it would take like 3 binders to fill up, but in football, I'll throw them all in binders, some of these sets. And it's cool to look at the uniforms. And the 93 SP it's an unbelievable set. If you can look at each card in a binder, like the photography, the gloss, the foil on the rookies. This is the Jerome Bettis that's pictured. Just an outstanding set overall. It's one of the best base sets that I think there is. 1993 Fleer is also one of my favorites. Right here I have just the team leader insert with Favre, white jersey. He's got lightning. It's kind of, it's the same as the iconic Jordan Ultra Scoring Kings card. It's the same type of thing where he's got the lightning coming down, but the base cards in there as well. I love that base set. It's not the greatest looking, I guess some would say, but it just brings back a lot of memories. The 93 Fleer football, I used to rip a lot of packs of that. And then the power set was cool. They had some parallels in there. You can take a look at those. Just really cool photos that kind of blur out the background, bring the players to the forefront. Skybox Premium. This is the Rick Meyer. He was a huge quarterback prospect at the time, never panned out. But there's Skybox Premium starts. They're kind of I guess it's a foil background. It's totally faded out on the back, and then they have the player to the forefront. This is the rookie insert, but the base cards are kind of similar to what they did with the Pro Set Power set, where they fade the background, bring the player to the front. And then the Great Pacific Prisms, I just think are awesome. This is an Alvin Harper. It's kind of like 97 Rubies esque, where the prism background kind of plays into the color match of the player, sort of.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite set from '93. And '93 was, you mentioned Rick Meyer, but it was Drew Bledsoe. He was the number one overall pick. So his cards were highly sought after, especially the '93 SP was just a huge card uh, back in the day. And you could see here with the Fleer, like this team leader, some of the Skybox premium inserts. This was where you started to see an expansion of creativity in the inserts, and that in subsequent years really kind of blossomed. But this is like the first look at where you could just see it on the screen here. This array of designs is vastly different from just 1 year prior.
Yeah, if you're gonna jump into like early '90s and just start kind of buying some cards, you might get bored with like, if you collect modern stuff now, you'll probably get bored with like 90, 91 stuff. Be like, it's all base. I would just start with 93. Like 93 is kind of where it's at with some of these cards. You get some of these cool looking inserts, you get some parallels, and then you just get even really cool base sets as well. Some of your better sets are starting out in 93. So 93 is kind of where it's at. This is where things get really good. They want to start including inserts because they notice that people aren't buying the base stuff anymore. They're trying to insert some of these cool designs. New sets are coming in, things like that. 93 baseball is the same. This is by far the best, my favorite. SP's first year, I think everybody knows about the 93 SP Jeter. That's like the most iconic card from that set. He wasn't he wasn't a big prospect at the time. He actually was a few steps down. That card wasn't huge at the time. It wasn't that
Right.
expensive. It's obviously gained traction because of being Derek Jeter, but you also had the Stadium Club Murphy set, which was released at Jack Murphy Stadium in like a Jack Murphy Stadium shaped box, and it was because they had the All Star game there at the time. So that Club Murphy Jeter that I've pictured here is another big card of his for his rookie selection. He's got really cool looking rookie cards. All of his 93 rookie cards are pretty neat. The Bowman's kind of cool too. This is the first year of Flair, which is really cool. I got the Greg Maddux listed here. It's just like the 93 SP football I showed you. This is like one of the best looking base sets that you can possibly get.
Yeah.
It's just an awesome card. I also have my favorite chase of the era. I ripped so many packs of 93 Upper Deck to try to get this Robin Yount George Brett 3000 hit. It was an SP, which means nothing really because there was a ton of them printed, but it was a shorter print than the hundreds of thousands of base cards, but it's still a really cool looking card. It commemorates Yount and Brett hitting their 3000th hit in 93. It's a really cool card. I was at the game when Yount got it. It's just brings back a lot of memories. I know we never pulled it. My dad and I ripped boxes of this stuff, never pulled it. We just bought it eventually at a couple of them at a card shop, but brings back great memories. The 93 Donruss I have pictured of Yount, but that set to me is iconic. It's an iconic design. I love the photography and the border in that set. And then one of my other favorite cards is the 93. It's not so much the set that's cool. I mean, I do like the border, but this Piazza card, I just remember having as a kid. I just always loved it. The black border,
Mm-hmm.
he's playing catcher, he's not batting, and he's just screaming at somebody or something. And it's just a really cool pose, really cool design. I like the black border cards.
Yeah, the Jeter SP4, that was like my big card I had as a kid, and still found it up till a couple of years ago. But yeah, that's like the iconic card there. He had a '92, I think it was like Little Sun High School Prospects card, that the auto that goes. So it's a hand auto card, not a facsimile, that goes for a lot of money. But the '93 SP foil is like the classic one. The Flair set, that was huge because that was like that, the Flair umbrellas sort of answer to SP in a way, in the sense that that was considered their premium premium product, and we saw them expand on that later with the Legacy collection and whatnot. And they also introduced one of my favorite sets for baseball, which was not a favorite of mine in '93, but became one later in the late '90s, which was Studio,
Mm.
which was usually just portrait photos of players. Maybe like headshots that you would see, but it gave you just kind of a different feel to cards. And they had a few inserts in that, like a heritage insert that showed players in like the black and white pictures in the old uniforms of that particular team. So that's a cool one if you want something that's like a little different than the action shots. Studio is a good reference point, but like football, '93, kind of a jumping off point for baseball as well.
All right. So you want to talk about the poll that I
Yeah.
had
So
running?
you put up a poll, and I think it was yesterday, right? And it was basically asking, I think, people their primary reason um, that they collect cards. I think is how you phrased
That
it.
they buy. Why do they buy a
Do you
card?
buy? Do
Yeah.
you buy? Okay, yeah. And so the the leading result was to build a specific collection. 53% of voters voted for that. Next was nostalgia at 39%, long term investment 8%, short term profit 0%. So that was interesting to see that nobody voted for that. Maybe someone was too embarrassed to vote for that. But I was really interested in nostalgia and building a specific collection because they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. But give me your thought process about including those as kind of um, two separate options.
So I'd like to start off by saying I'd love to see someone post that question who has a more broad following than I do. I assume that I wasn't going to get a ton of the long term investment or the short term profit dealers because I just don't have a lot of people that follow me like that. Um, I figured that it was usually going to either be the specific collection curating, as everybody calls it, or the nostalgia purpose. And the reason why I split those two up, my whole purpose of this was to see the balance between building the specific collection, curating a specific collection like player, team, set, whatever, and sticking to that. Or do you buy cards as pure nostalgia? It's something that brings back memories, buy it. I wanted to see where that balance was, and it was interesting to see. I wanted to purposely split those up because it was interesting to see how many people prioritize the specific collection. I think I don't know for sure, but I would guess like if I posted this question maybe I don't know like 3 or 4 years ago, I think that the results might have been different. I think it would have been a lot more nostalgia because when people were jumping back into buying cards, it seemed like a lot of for nostalgia purposes are like, oh, I remember Jordan, I remember Griffey, I remember Favre.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go buy his cards that I didn't buy when I was a kid, whatever. Oh, I've explored this new parallel I never knew about because I never saw one a Rubies before a PMG. I'm gonna go buy it. They would have selected nostalgia because they didn't really know what specific players or teams or sets they wanted to collect. Now I think you see an increase in the specific collection because people are starting to curate and build their collection based on they found what a set that they like, they found players that they like, teams, whatever, and they're just really focusing on a select number of types of cards or select player or whatever. Nostalgia, I would, I guess 4 years ago, I would have fallen into this category. If I had to answer my own poll on here, I would have picked build a specific collection because though I love Brett Favre, the Packers, the Brewers, Ryan Brown, all that, I don't buy every single Brett Favre card, obviously. I buy actually a very limited number, or, when we look at like Aaron Rodgers or even like Freeman, it's only specific sets. So I'm only buying specific types of cards of certain players. Now, nostalgia drives second to that. It drives who I buy from those teams, but it's nostalgia is not really a reason why I'm buying the cards. It kind of just drives who it is, and then the specific types of cards are what drives my collecting.
Yeah, I voted for build a specific collection as well. I think the nostalgia informs the methodology of the pursuit, I guess, of these particular cards and how you go about um, building out your PC. Because if there is no nostalgic tie, it's hard to buy and keep cards of that player. Like if you don't like Griffey or you didn't like Griffey as a kid for whatever reason, and you see everybody else buying Griffey, so you think you should do it, chances are that's probably not going to last because there's no attachment there to you. But building a specific PC to me is almost like the execution, and nostalgia is kind of the inspiration, if that makes sense.
100%.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in. If you are US based, hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Make sure you get a little R&R time. Continue posting cards. Reach out to us on Instagram, and we will catch you next week.